Hello everyone, it's David from Automotive Press. Guess what? I have a 2024 Porsche Panamera behind me, and I know that most people don't talk about Panamera anymore because we're all looking for SUVs these days, including Cayennes and Porsche Macans. But this one is worth looking at it because it has the best of both worlds. It drives like a sports machine, like a sports sedan, but it has most of the utility nature and the functionality of SUVs, and therefore I love this vehicle. But there's so much things I do want to share about this new Panamera because he has gone through a major refresh and major overhaul for 2024. Now I always say there are 5 things the cars have to meet in terms of criteria for consideration, especially if it's a sports machine or a high performance machine, because obviously the price tag is such that we expect a lot from those vehicles. 5 things are: number 1, it has to have a really good manufacturing quality. That's given, obviously, if you're going to pay more than $100,000 for a car. It has to be built well, it has to be reliable. Number 2, it has to have a really good functionality in terms of interior fit and finish, interior quality, but also interior practicality and functionality. Number 3, obviously it has to perform well, so that's performance. And I don't just mean in terms of 0 to 60 times or pure horsepower. I mean an overall balance between handling, ride, performance, transmission shifting, and so forth. Number 4, it has to have a good reputation and good recognition, because you don't want to buy a vehicle and no one notices it or no one knows about it. I think to buy a high performance, high profile vehicle, it needs to have a good reputation as well. And that includes the fact that it needs to have a good resale value down the road, because you don't want a car company to, let's say, go bankrupt in 10 years just because it's a startup and therefore the car is not worth anything. I think it's really important that it has to have a long-term strategy. And finally, number 5, it has to have a good service and good dealer network, because you don't want to buy a vehicle in which something goes wrong and you take it back to the dealership and they don't look after you. So those are the 5 main criteria for buying, owning, and enjoying high performance, high profile vehicle. And I tell you what, this 2024 Porsche Panamera meets all of those criteria and more. So let me walk you through each one of those things in regard to this all new Panamera. Let's go. Welcome back. So I have the 2024 Porsche Panamera that has gone through a major overhaul. And I know this is not our most popular vehicle in North America, because we tend to look for Cayenne or SUVs when it comes to Porsche models. But honestly, this one has the best of both worlds because it sits low, it feels like a sports car, but you have most of the utility of an SUV. But coming back to my 5 criteria, first one is manufacturing quality. That's obviously one of the most important things for me. So let's take a look at how good the quality is. I'm going to use my usual measuring stick and measure the gap. The hood and the fender is kind of interesting design because this goes over this way. It's a huge front fender. But anyway, if you could believe that, is 2.8 millimeter here in terms of gap, and perfect alignment. This is one of the best in the world. I think the closest I've measured is 2.9. Maybe it was 2.8 millimeter coming out of a Mazda CX-90 or maybe a Tahara Belt Lexus GX. That's about 2.8 to 3 millimeter range. But no other car has achieved the 2.8 millimeter gap that I remember. This is also 2.9 millimeter. A bit wider here at 3 millimeter, which is often the case. Usually the center one is a bit wider. And then back to 2.9 millimeters. So super narrow gap. The manufacturing quality is fantastic out of this Panamera. It's built like a tank actually in many ways, because Porsche is known for building vehicles that are just really strong and durable and has a really good rigid body. So body panels, alignment, excellent. What about the paint jobs? 220 microns. 238 microns. I'm going to keep on measuring and I'll make some comment. 157 on the front door. 185, and finally a rear quarter panel, 196. So this is, I would say, 30 to almost 50% thicker than your typical mass-produced vehicles. Most cars, including Lexus, around 100 to 120 microns. Some European cars are thicker. Usually their paint job is thicker, around 140, 150. But it's very rare that we see paint thickness that's close to 200 microns, because most cars are around 100, which means these paint jobs are almost twice as thick. There's no PPF on this paint, so it's the native paint thickness I'm measuring. And obviously, thicker the paint, the better, because it's more protection for the sheet metals underneath, and it has better resistance to nicks and chips and so forth from the road debris. So I'm really happy that Porsche has put a fair amount of paint job to over 200 microns. And so you know that the paint has enough thickness to protect the body, but also just the quality of this paint is excellent. This is Carrera white paint, which is slightly off-white with a metallic to it, perhaps the most popular color in the Porsche lineup. And the paint job looks absolutely fantastic with very little orange peel. And even the plastic parts over here, if you look at the bumper compared to the rear fender, the paint match is excellent. That's something that is difficult to do, and most manufacturers cannot match the plastic parts to metal parts really well in terms of paint matching, but they do a really good job here. Almost every panel is aluminum here, obviously, with the Porsche Panamera because of the lightness, and basically that's the trend these days, to make everything as light as possible. So beautiful exterior, beautiful paint. Now let's take a look at the inside and see how the quality is. So now I'm inside the Panamera, and I want to first do a quality check because I want to make sure that the interior is as well built as the exterior. So let's take a look at all the stitching. Now, as you guys may or may not know, with a Porsche, you can have almost unlimited number of options and features added, which will add substantially more money to the actual final price tag. So things like the stitching on the door panels and different combination leather and materials are all part of the option packages. So this one has the optional leather package, and you can see the stitching here, and you want to make sure these stitchings are absolutely straight. Same on the door side here. And this one has this beautiful kind of bronze finish along the door, also matching on the steering wheel. So it has a really subtle bronze finish, which I like. It's not gold, more like a bronze. And I love this package because it matches the Porsche emblem in terms of color. But coming back to the quality here, so the quality is really good, but a couple of things to keep in mind. One is that there's just way too much piano black. This is a new design. This opens up, but look at the piano black, piano black, piano black. And just earlier when sun was hitting the interior, this reflection was so bright that it was kind of annoying. So I don't like the fact that they have so much piano black. This is nice here. This textured aluminum finish is nice. But you can see a little bit of an issue here. This one is a glove compartment, so it actually opens. But this part is a little bit off, so I'm surprised about that. But this is a brand new model, so they'll get these things sorted out as time goes. The initial production may have some minor issues. But when it comes to leather finish, that's the strength of Porsche. All the panels are leather, seats are leather. It's just fantastic quality. Also great smell. Some leathers don't have any smell, but Porsche has a very distinct smell because of the type of material they use for leather and other parts of the vehicle as well. So in terms of the overall quality, it's excellent. I noticed some mismatched parts here, which I think will get fixed or can be adjusted at a dealership. But in terms of engineering, obviously all new dash panel, all new center console. I don't like the piano black, it's too much. But you can also get a secondary screen now, which are not visible from the driver's side, but you can see it from passenger side. That's the new thing with Porsche, is to have a secondary panel, and so you can actually adjust things like HVAC and also play with the radio controls without having to deal with a driver's side and the all new driver's instrumentation as well. But otherwise, this is tried and true in terms of the feel of the steering, the overall quality, and the fit and finish is obviously right up there in terms of what I expect from Porsche. So overall, I love the interior, but more than that, you can customize it to nth degree to whatever you desire, and that's one of the strengths of the Porsche. Now, I was also curious about the quietness of this Porsche because it's way quieter than what I do remember of the previous Panameras. So let's measure the decibel right now. So I'll shut up for a second and I'll show you how quiet it is. So it's about 44 decibel, which is really quiet. Most luxury cars are around 40 to 50 decibels. Some are louder. If it's a hybrid or electric cars, obviously dead quiet. But this is really quiet for a gasoline powered vehicle. This is not a hybrid. It's a beautiful engine, by the way, and I really like the way this engine feels on the road. More on that later on. So overall manufacturing quality and overall fit and finish and functionality, absolutely excellent. Now keep in mind that this is a 5-door hatchback. It's not a 4-door sedan. So you do get pretty decent space in the back, but it is a low profile, low height vehicle, so you don't get as much headroom as let's say in a Cayenne. That's obviously the case because of the shape of the vehicle. But you get pretty good trunk space and cargo space because it's a 5-door hatchback. You can open the rear hatch and you get pretty decent space because the seats are also foldable. So you almost get, I would say, 70% of the utility of a smaller SUVs. But when it comes to interior spacing, obviously you can't beat something like a Cayenne, which has lots of space, especially in the headroom area. Now let's talk about the third element, which is the performance of this vehicle. So now I'm going to talk about the most important factor and criteria, which is performance. After all, this is a Porsche. You expect nothing short of the highest standard in terms of driving feel, in terms of steering feel, overall performance, and so forth. And this, of course, does not disappoint. Now keep in mind that most people think that all European high-performance brands feel about the same. That's BMW, Audis, of course this Porsche right here, Mercedes, and so forth. But what people don't realize is how different the Porsche is when it comes to steering feel and overall driving characteristic. Now the engine or the power plant does feel somewhat similar between the Porsche product and Audi product because they share so much of the components. For example, this model has a 348 horsepower 2.9 liter twin turbo V6 engine, and that comes from Audi's parts bin. So obviously the engine feels similar to Audi RS5, which also uses the same 2.9 liter engine, but it's tuned differently and it's engineered differently. It's designed to maximize the Porsche feel. Regardless of that, the biggest difference, of course, as I drive away here, is the overall steering character. Only Porsche is able to give me this true road feel where I can kind of sense exactly which way the steering is pointed, where I can tell exactly what's happening underneath the road. It has a really good tactile feel to it and just right amount of feedback and just right amount of weight. Most European cars, even BMWs these days, are just too numb and too light with no regard to what the drivers really want from their performance cars, which is to communicate with the road. And honestly, only Porsche gets it. Only Porsche engineers seems to be able to produce this sensation and feel. So when it comes to like pure performance in terms of steering feel and steering character, honestly, don't bother looking for any other brand. They just can't match it. Surprisingly, I would say Mercedes comes closest to mimicking Porsche's steering feel because they have a pretty good feedback and sense of weight. But truthfully, even BMWs, which are known for good handling and steering, just can't seem to match the Porsche's feel. So that's the first thing. It's a truly good steering feel. Stays really flat on the corners. This one has a huge tires on it, 30 series tires, so it is truly flat. But also it's comfortable because it has standard air suspension even on the base model. However, on the hybrid models, which is called e-hybrid, if you want, you can get what they call the Porsche dynamic suspension, which can do crazy things because it's able to keep the car absolutely flat even when you dive or when you accelerate or going around the corners, because it uses a much more advanced system than a standard air suspension, and therefore it's capable of counteracting many of the normal suspension movements that happens when you drive the vehicle, especially around corners or when you're diving because you step on the brake really hard. And so those are some of the key differences. I don't have the Porsche dynamic suspension on this one, but I do have the standard air suspension, which is already very good. And I can tell you that the ride is actually surprisingly smooth and comfortable, despite having such a huge tires and very low profile tires. And in fact, you might be surprised how refined and smooth the ride is, even though you're driving a sports performance vehicle. Now let's come back to the engine for a second. The 2.9 liter twin turbo V6 engine is more than powerful enough. Take off when you step on the gas, 0 to 60 just over 4 seconds. But it's also the feel of it. It's sensational. It's smooth, refined, provides a very progressive feel, but also feels very different than, let's say, the same engine that's in Macan GTS, which I did own for several years. And that 2.9 liter in the Macan GTS has a lot of pops and crackles and sounds, which makes it really fun. But we don't get that in the Panamera because this is supposed to be a luxury saloon designed to maybe even carry passengers in the back. So it is very quiet, as I talked about a little bit earlier. The braking is solid, as you expect from Porsche, and everything else about the vehicle just feels right. And once again, this is something that most other brands, even expensive brands, sometimes just cannot get it right because their engineers just don't have the same sense of emphasis on anything to do with road feel. I think Porsche really understands that, and they do that really well. By the way, keep in mind that the Panamera is available in standard configuration as a two-wheel drive, or this one, Panamera 4, as an all-wheel drive. But you can also get hybrid system, which is called e-hybrid, and then the flagship model is called a turbo e-hybrid with phenomenal amount of power and torque. Most people don't need that. I think it's an overkill. Panamera 4, which is this model I'm driving, I think is a sweet spot because you get all of the performance you expect from a Porsche, but it's also all-wheel drive. And if you're living in a country like Canada, which is the case for me, I know that this could be all-year, all-season vehicles. I think it's an ideal. And the all-wheel drive system really, really works well. It's just a proven system in a Porsche. It's reliable and it's engineered well. I almost forgot to mention the very important piece of the puzzle, which is also the transmission, which is Porsche's classic PDK, which has a lightning fast shift between gears. It's able to downshift as well on the fly. And most of all, when you use paddle shifter, it can shift up and down manually, and it's just a gorgeous transmission to work with. Once again, one of the best in the world. The fourth point I mentioned earlier is reputation, which also includes long-term resale value, long-term reliability, and so forth. And in case you didn't know, Porsche, especially when compared to other European brands, has one of the best reliability records. It has a really good reliability over 3, 4, 5 years, but also even shorter term, like 1 or 2 years, it's done really well in a variety of different consumers' ratings and ranking, including those from Consumer Report and JD Power. And I know you might not trust some of those things, but having been a Porsche owner for many years now, I can tell you that the quality of manufacturing and long-term reliability is absolutely excellent, which adds to the mystique and the beauty of Porsche, because if you buy some other brands like Lamborghini or McLaren or even Ferrari, well, the reliability isn't there and it could be very expensive to repair when those things go wrong. But Porsche has a really good engineering behind the scene, and therefore I think the reliability and therefore the reputation is well protected. And as I mentioned maybe in some of the previous videos, Porsche adopted lean manufacturing technique or Toyota production technique many years ago, many decades ago in fact, and that's in place for all of the manufacturing plant that produces Porsche. And that's one of the reasons why the cars are well built and can maintain high quality for a long time, because their manufacturing processes are not just efficient, but are also highly standardized and super well managed. So in terms of reputation, I think you already know Porsche is one of the most recognized brands. People are extremely loyal. I'm a member of the Porsche Club of America. There's a Western division here in BC, and people are absolutely fanatic about their brand. They get together, and there's a real community and network of things that allow people to stay together and talk about the brand, talk about the product. And that's one of the key differentiators between Porsche and many other brands. So this brings me to my fifth point, which is the fact that the network of owners, of the dealers and so forth are absolutely excellent. And they all protect and help each other to learn about the product, but also to make sure that these cars are well serviced. For example, I've had a number of friends who eventually end up buying a Porsche after some convincing from me, and they couldn't believe the difference in terms of service and network of service compared to BMW, Audis, and some other luxury brands, even compared to, let's say, Lexus. The Porsche, especially with this particular dealer, which is Porsche Center Langley, have an absolute world-class service. I can tell you right now, having owned Lexus and BMW, Audis, Porsches, and many, many different brands, that among all of them, I think the experience that I have at the Porsche Center Langley is the best. Absolutely no doubt whatsoever. They take care of you. They give you a courtesy car, which is also obviously a Porsche, and whatever you need, they answer your questions really well. And most of all, they really make you feel special and privileged to own a Porsche. So that's a very important point that most people forget when buying and owning a luxury or high performance model, is that your experience and ownership experience shouldn't be limited to just the performance of the vehicle. It also needs to take into account the experience you have at the dealership and the service you get. So for example, I'm getting one of my Porsche service at the Porsche Center Langley, and they've given me this Panamera to drive. So big thank you and a big appreciation for Porsche Center Langley for letting me drive the all new Porsche Panamera. But even if I wasn't the media, I can drop off any Porsche car that I might own, even an older one, and I can request a brand new Cayenne or Macan as a service car or courtesy car, and they will give it to me. And that's not always the case. For example, you guys know I own a Lexus, and I'm finding it really difficult to get courtesy cars sometimes. It's booked for many weeks in advance, but Porsche has so many courtesy cars that I can almost always get one when I need it, and they're always, you know, high performance machines. I'm not getting a cheap Volkswagen in replacement. I'm not getting a genuine Porsche courtesy car. So again, hats off to Porsche Center Langley for being one of the best dealers I've dealt with, but also as a whole brand, I think Porsche is doing a better job of satisfying customers than other brands, as we can see in many of the surveys that's coming out, including some of the most recent survey that came out of a JD Power, which state that Porsche owners are one of the happiest and most satisfied owners in the world. So that's sort of my conclusion to this beautiful drive with Porsche Panamera. I know not all of you guys would want lower height 4-door sedan or 5-door hatchback anymore, because most buyers are going to want to buy the Cayenne, which would be a more practical choice. And I would agree that if I was buying a car for my family, the Cayenne would be my #1 choice, followed by Macan, just because they're more practical in terms of space. But if you're considering a Porsche Macan, for example, it is quite a tight interior spacing, interior packaging, and something like a Panamera actually provides more comfort, even though you're sitting lower and maybe there aren't as much headroom. So there's always some compromise you have to make. But from my perspective, if you want a sports car feel where you sit low, where you can see the hood in front of you and it's very prominent, and you're not sitting up really high, so the center of gravity is low, and you still want that pure Porsche performance, and in addition you want some practicality compared to a traditional sedan, and in that case the Porsche Panamera fits that criteria like a glove. It provides the best of both worlds, like I said, high performance sports car feel, nice and low in the ground, but enough practicality and functionality to make this a really good family vehicle. It is a very popular choice in Asia, especially in China, not so popular in North America, but don't overlook the Panamera if you're looking for high performance, European branded sports machine. It's not always Cayenne, it's not always about Macan. The Panamera may fit your bill better than you expect. So go for a test drive with Porsche Center Langley. They're the best in town, and they will take care of you and look after you. Everyone at the Porsche Center Langley, in the service department as well as in the sales, are absolutely first class. So I hope you enjoyed my videos about Porsche Panamera in terms of why I think this is one of the best choices in the high performance market, and why this not just meet but exceed my expectation from those 5 criteria. And if you enjoyed my video, I would appreciate it if you can give me a thumbs up and make some comments below. And if you haven't done so yet, would you also kindly subscribe? Until next video, I'm signing off for now. Thank you so much.